So I get asked a fair bit, how do I know which is the right compressor to use and on what do I use it? So today I thought we'd go into the DAW and have a look at a couple different types and see what they can do for your mixes. Let's get started. Alright, so here we are in Pro Tools. We've worked on this session before. I'll just play you a little bit so you can get a flavour. So it's a pretty cool kind of rock song. We've got drums, bass, guitars, and you know, it's dynamic. It was recorded, it's all live instruments, real players, musicians in a live room, and so we're gonna need some compression. So we've got a few different compressors that represent the different types. So we've got the classic VCA compressor, voltage controlled amplifier circuit. That's where voltage goes in, it hits the voltage controlled amplifier and it says at a specific threshold you are going to turn this voltage down, and that's kind of how that works. Most famously the SSL bus compressor, been on the consoles since, you know, the early days of mixing on 4000E, 4000G series consoles. Another VCA example, DBX 160, a little bit less complicated, where you've got an attack and release and a variable sort of ratios here. You've got the variable ratio, but it's a fixed attack, fixed release. It's quite a snappy sound, very fast, can be a little bit savage, but awesome on certain things, especially heavier transient materials. That's our VCA style compressor. Another type we've got the FET compressor, the field effect transistor. So similar to the DBX 160, where you don't have as many variables, you do have a variable attack and release here. Counterintuitive to some others. All the way to the left is actually the slowest, and all the way to the right is the fastest, which is actually back to front to other compressors. You've got ratio buttons here. You can choose between, you know, 4, 8, 12 and 20, which is kind of limiting. Or you can do the classic all buttons in mode by holding shift. And that gives you a much more aggressive sound, a much more aggressive ratio. It's pretty cool. We'll get into that a bit later. Next on our hit list is the opto compressor. So this has a tube out amplification circuit, followed by, preceded by a optical light emitting diode and a light receiving photoreceptor cell. The more level goes in towards the threshold, the brighter that light shines on the receptor cell, the more compression we get. As a result, it's quite a slow, smooth style of compression. It's great for leveling. It says here, you know, Teletronic's leveling amplifier. These things are known for their classic sort of smooth leveling of vocals, of guitars, of bass. You know, they're really good for that. Here's a sort of another slightly more modern example. We've got a variable attack and release, but we've still got that classic tube opto compression sound and feeling. We'll get into that one too. Last two, the variable mu. Biasing the tubes is what gives us our compression in this style of circuit. So known for a very smooth, very rich sounding compression, especially because it's heavily, you know, there's a lot of tubes in these, so you really do get a lot of coloration. Smooth, you know, they're great for mastering, they're great for vocals, they can be good on mix bus. It's another one that's pretty interesting. And the OG is of course the Fairchild. You know, back in the days when the Beatles were recording, or vintage Motown kind of records, they would have had Fairchilds. So many tubes. It's just, even just the act of running stuff through this, you know, can enhance your sound, so that's pretty cool. And the last is the diode bridge compressor. This is like the famous Neve 33609, preceded by the 2254, which was the original version. These work similarly to, in my understanding at least, a VCA compressor, only they use a diode bridge circuit to handle the actual compression. And as such, it gives it a really unique sound and a really unique character. You can see, you know, in the original, we've got no specified attack really. It's just sort of fast, which is around that 4 milliseconds, I think, from memory, or a slightly slower variant. And then a release and an output. This has got a dual stage, so it's got a limiter that gets hit first, followed by a compressor, and then of course a later revision, the 33609 has slightly more controls to build on from that, really. So, all different styles, and what it comes down to is, what are you trying to achieve? And it's about understanding what these compressors can give you in terms of their character. So, for example, if we have a look at our drums here, we just solo up our drums. They're punchy, they're big, but they're very transient, and then it's not going to cut for a mix. We need to control those a little bit more. And how we can control those is with compression. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag over onto our snare bus, because I think that's a good place to start. I'm going to take an opto compressor, and I'm going to take a VCA compressor, and I'll go with our FET compressor. So we've sort of got one of most of the common types. I'm going to dial in some settings on each of these, and then we can do an A/B comparison to sort of give you an idea of, which one might be better for what you're trying to do. Realistically, what we're trying to do with our snare is we're trying to control that peak. We're trying to take the transient, control it, lengthen out the sustain of the drum maybe, or maybe we want to do the opposite. Maybe we want to emphasize that transient. So we need to know which one of these is going to give me the flexibility to do that. Well, the 1176 has got variable attack and release. Might be a little bit too fast. Field effect transistor circuits are known for being really, really, really fast on transients. So sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not the right tool for the job. It's not a bad thing, it's just there are better tools. The DBX 160 doesn't have any variable attack and release. So maybe that's where, these sort of more vintage tools might not be the go either. We might need to replace them with something else, and I've got one in store to kind of demonstrate that in a minute. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to give you a VCA, a FET, and an opto on the snare drum. We're going to dial this thing in, and we'll have a listen. Cool. So that's to a point where I'm pretty happy. I'm going to just dial in the 1176 so we can do a quick A/B. So as we go down through these, listen to the transient. Is it poking out more? Is it poking out less? What's happening to the length of the drum? Is the sustain coming up? Can we hear more of that detail in the rest of the overall picture of that snare drum? Because that's kind of what we're going for here. We're trying to control the transient, bring up the sustain, and choosing the right tool for the job is really important. Each box has its own color, the circuitry that's been modeled and everything, but it also has its own envelope shaping properties which add to that overall aesthetic of the drum. What you can also pay attention to is, looking at the meters and how fast are they moving? Are they letting go in time? Because, for example, if we start with the LA2A, it might not be letting go fast enough before the next snare comes. And then what that means is we're already in mid compression and we're cutting off that transient because it's not quick enough to let go in between. So we need to find a compressor that's fast enough to control the transient, fast enough to let go of the transient before the next one hits, so that we're getting that consistency every time. So here we go, all three, one after the other. $11.76. LA2A. So what do I hear? I hear that the DBX 160 is taming that transient nicely. It's bringing up that detail in a pretty musical way. It doesn't feel overdone to me. The 1176 is doing a similar job. It's bringing it more forward in your face because the release is just that little bit quicker, it feels. It's kind of hitting it and pushing it straight back at you. The LA2A, though, for me, is not the right tool for the job. You can feel it's kind of holding it back and it's dragging it and it's kind of changing the groove. And that's not really what we want. We want snappy, 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 not kind of yet in a second, yet in a second. I'm going to throw one more spanner in the works, which is a modern day classic, the Distressor. Now, this is a VCA compressor, but it can be kind of emulating many different types of compressors. For example, it can emulate an 1176, it can emulate an LA2A, it can emulate an SSL or a DBX 160, all those kind of styles because of its variety of options here, the attack, release, the different distortion modes. It's a really cool box. So I'm going to dial in some settings here and we'll see what this sort of sounds like in comparison, because we've now got more flexibility with our attack and release. So here we go. Now what's also important to note is I'm looking over here at the VU meter. When our snare is not being compressed, it's hitting about -5. Okay, and when we are compressing, I'm trying to make sure we're also hitting -5, so we're not being fooled by loudness, we're just hearing the effect of the compression. So I'll demonstrate with the Distressor. And you can see the peak level is roughly the same, but that sonic difference is massive. To go for a different sort of variation on the Distressor, first I'll explain. I've put it in opto mode, which is sort of emulating an LA2A. We've got a very slow attack and a very fast release. I'm emphasizing the mid-range. I'm asking the compressor to pay more attention to the mid-range frequencies and compress those first. That leaves our lows and our highs slightly less affected. And I've opted for distortion type number 2, which is even order harmonics. So what I can do is I'm going to go to the B setting here, so we've still got that A setting. We can do a quick comparison between two different types and how versatile this compressor can be. So I could go for a regular sort of 6-to-1. Let's go, and the way I like to dial this in, actually, if you don't really know sort of what settings, and you're not really sure about compression, you're trying to hear it, it's a bit difficult. You can overdo it, and I'll show you how I do it. And you can dial in until you just get the attack you want, and then just the release you want, and then you can back off the compression. So this is what I do. I turn it up to the max and turn the volume way down. And what's that going to do? That's going to absolutely annihilate this, and it's going to mean that we really only hear sort of the peaks or the sustain coming through, depending on what attack and release settings are. So I'm going to start with the fastest attack and the longest release. That means it's going to let through next to no transient, and I can back it off, back it off, back it off until I hear enough transient poking through, and then I can do the release and I can open it up until I hear the sustain that I like, and then I can dial in the amount of compression that I want. So here we go. So interesting. So if I open it right up, you can hear all the snare poke through. It's not really what we want. We're not controlling it enough. But if I go too far to a fast attack, we're taking off too much of that transient. You'll be able to hear that here. I'll turn it up just a little bit so it's easier to hear, and I'll dial it back. So here's a faster attack. It's really pinning that transient down. And with that slow attack, it's really letting it through. So we're going to find somewhere in the middle and then dial in our release. Cool, so now you can hear that that top of the transient is being taken off, it's been taken care of. The sustain's come up, but it's not too quickly releasing, so we've still got a bit of control over that sustain. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flick between A and B, because what I've got here is a really slow attack where all the transient's coming through and a super fast release, followed by a more moderate setting where we are taking off some of that transient at a slightly different ratio, so you can hear the differences. So we'll start with the slow one first. So you can hear that difference. You can hear the way it's rounding the transient off, it's smoothing it out, it's controlling the dynamics of that snare. And really, it's all in context. So I'm doing this in solo so you can hear it. But, you know, for me, this was about demonstrating the different types of compression. We can see that that little bit more flexibility from the distressor, you know, enables us to do different things with the snare, or with the material that we're working with. So, you know, learning compressors is not just like, oh, there's so many, which one do I use? It's what are the strengths of each unit, learn them. You have to experiment, you have to research, you have to, you know, play with the plugins and figure it out. What am I trying to achieve? Okay, which one has those attributes? And that's the one you use. So I'm going to leave the distressor on the snare, and I happen to know for me personally that I quite like a DBX 160 on the kick drum, so I'm going to take it back over there and dial that guy in on the kick. Cool, nice little bit of control there. What am I listening for? Again, it's that release. I want the kick to be a little bit controlled, not squashed, and I just want it to kind of knock it back and then let it go, knock it back and let it go, and that keeps it in that one place locked. So now in the context of the kick and the snare, what I can do is I can come down here, I can highlight both of them, and I can A/B on and off like this. So keep your eyes over here and we'll hear the difference just those two compressors have made to our kick and our snare in the context of the mix here. So here's without. So you can really hear it there on the snare, lifting that sustain up, which helps that snare cut through the mix. It's also kept them consistent, which now means that they're locked in that space in the front to back sort of three-dimensional depth field of our mix.